Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Deercast. Today we have the lovely Katie Hargreaves joining us. For those of you who don't know about Katie, I'm sure there aren't many of you, but Katie is a fantastic wildlife artist. She is a deer stalker and, importantly, a vegan. And we're very lucky, really, because Tom has met her and managed to cajole her into doing this podcast.
Yeah, I didn't really give her a huge amount of choice, I don't think, because so my now wife and I we used Katie as the sort of artist to put together all the fluffy bits that go with your wedding when you have it, basically like your table names, your table plan, and all the rest of it. So all our tables at our weddings were named after different species of deer. So she did some really nice pictures and names and stuff for us. And I don't know, it was sort of, I'd obviously seen her on the Phil Sports channel videos and everything, and then having used her and sort of got to know her a little bit, thought, you know what, this could be really interesting if she came on the podcast. Really interesting to get female perspective as well. Yeah, I think we ended up recording a really interesting podcast.
Yeah, no, I think so. Yeah, it was the first woman we've had on the podcast, which seems bizarre to me that there aren't more
Yeah.
female deer stalkers on it. Speaking of women, I'm absolutely amazed that you convinced your other half to name all of the tables at your wedding after deer. That was pretty impressive.
It wasn't me. It was my mother-in-law who, because I can't remember, we were sitting there thinking, and I think one of the suggestions was, oh, name it after all the countries that you guys have travelled to, and that just seemed a bit boring and a bit mainstream. And my mother-in-law, I think she was about 5 glasses of wine in by this point. She said, "Why don't you just name it after different species of deer?" And it wasn't me that suggested it, so I was like, I just seized that moment. It was like, that sounds like a great idea. And I think my now wife was a few glasses of wine in as well, and she was like, "Oh, screw it, what's the worst that can happen?" And literally by the next morning, by the time everyone had sobered up and realised it was a terrible idea, I'd already booked Katie, and that was it. Too late. We were rocking and rolling.
And she drew some beautiful,
She did,
some beautiful
yeah.
artwork for it, which you've actually still got, haven't you?
Yeah. So
So we're in Tom's house at the minute. He's got them hanging on the wall. Which
yeah,
is really nice.
so they're all framed on the wall, and so really nice kind of memento, but also just really nice, cool pictures of deer.
Exactly. Without any further ado, because you probably want to get on and listen to Katie, we'll hand over to her.
Katie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Hello. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. So, do you want to kick off, Katie, by telling us a little bit about you and how you got into deer stalking?
Yeah. So, hello everyone. I'm Katie. I'm based in Norfolk. For anyone listening in Norfolk, woohoo. I've been a stalker, sort of on and off, for probably 9 years. But that does not mean I've been out a lot. It's been very sort of sporadic. But it all started because my ex-boyfriend Dan, he was a mad stalker. He just lived and breathed deer. He was a manager for a couple of estates, and all of his spare time was spent out in the woods. So he sort of introduced me into that world, which is quite a good question to start with because he also pushed me into the art business world as well. So it all started at the same time, which was back in 2016. So yeah, I didn't expect to be an artist. I didn't expect to be a deer stalker, but it just so happened that he showed me the joys of the deer world and had some good connections that helped me kick off my art.
How did that come about in terms of when you first met? Did he say, "Oh, by the way, I'm a deer stalker," and you thought, "What a weirdo,"
Yeah,
or did you think,
yeah.
um,
I didn't know anything about deer, and I remember going round Richmond Park fairly early on, and he was talking about that's a fallow deer and that's a red deer, and I was like, oh, God, he knows so much about deer. Literally that. And then he said, oh, the antlers fall off every year, and I was like, what a nerd. How do you even know that? And it's quite funny looking back on that because, you know, I'm a bit of a nerd now. But yeah, I was just fascinated why he was so obsessed with them. And then when he took me out and it was like, you know, actually in the field and seeing it, it just got really exciting. And more recently, I've just become really interested in getting out into the countryside and seeing nature and using that as obviously inspiration, and hopefully taking some fairly decent photos for myself to work from, but also just to like calm my brain down and enjoy it for what it is.
So what was your sort of first of the stalking experiences? Was it going out with your ex in Norfolk, I imagine?
It was in Norfolk. It was, I think, the first 3 times we went stalking, there was no success, as you might say. Well, I wouldn't say that. I would say we didn't kill anything. So
did you at least see something, or did you think this hobby is a real bust?
No, we definitely did, and I think there were a couple of opportunities to shoot, but I just wasn't comfortable because it was just a bit too dark for my own
So the first time you went out, you were actually shooting. You didn't go out with him shooting.
Actually, that is true. I went out a few times with my camera, and I was like, I don't want to do it, but I'll try and get some photos. But he didn't shoot anything at those points. So the first time that we went stalking to kill something and did, it was me doing it. But yeah, it was Robux in Norfolk, so it's pretty special.
Wow.
Yeah.
And did you eventually get one, or did that come much later?
Yeah. It was an interesting stalk, and I need to get myself a deer journal because I need to just write these things down because he had them, and that's one of the things I would love to like create for as part of my business at some point, is to do a deer journal. Yeah, I know it's gonna happen. It's like a serious dream of mine. I just need to do it basically. But it was like 3 days and we just didn't get the right opportunity. It was like not a safe shot, or we just couldn't find them. Anyway, we basically had given up, and it was a last gasp situation where we were driving away, and like in the last field that it could have been in, there was this roebuck standing on a hedgerow, and it was like, get out of the car, put the sticks up, and that was it. And it was like so quick. But it was sort of like meant to be. And I think that taught me to not just, be impatient about it. Like you can't just expect to show up in a field with a gun and then that's it. And that's not the exciting part. The exciting part is the whole being out there and seeing them and waiting for that right chance. So
yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a lot of people who come and they start deer stalking and they go out and they shoot something within the first like hour.
Yeah.
They get like they're just sort of like, well, is that it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I took my little brother out, Fergus, who Tom knows, who's very impatient. I took him out deer stalking, and it was like the most jammy thing in the entire world. He'd never really been shooting, wasn't really that interested, but I took him out. In the first like 10 minutes, the deer like just stood like right in front of him, just like perfectly. And he shot it, and he was just like, well, that was just really easy. I don't know what you were going on about for all these years. Like, it's just quite boring.
Yeah,
but I think having that, like, it's all in the anticipation, isn't it?
Yeah,
and working hard for it and walking a long way for it and all of that. So
exactly, the thrill in the chase, isn't it? Really.
Yeah.
So your first roebuck, when you pulled the trigger on it, how did you then feel? Were you kind of like, great, amazing, I've done it, because you had all that build up, or were you suddenly then sort of thinking, oh my god, what have I done?
It's always been the same every single deer I've shot. It's a case of, I was vegan at the time as well, so that was still in the balance, but I obviously was just very, very, very worried that I hadn't killed it, and just constantly searching for like affirmation that it had been killed properly. It was an excitement. I still don't really get excited at that point. I know a lot of people feel that sort of rush of adrenaline. For me, it's just worry. But it's I would never take the shot if I was not sure that I would kill it cleanly. It's just a case of, I just really hope that I've not made that animal suffer as much as possible, basically.
Yeah. And I was going to use the awful phrase of trophy hunter, in the sense that did you go then keep the antlers and think, I want to keep these as part of a sort of memento of what you've done, or is that not something that you sort of interest you at all? Or
I have the antlers still, and I don't have, well, I've shot 4 deer now, and I don't have 2 of them because they were young Chinese water deer bucks, and I thought, to be honest, I don't really want a tiny little skull that doesn't really look that impressive. I guess I'm a bit of a trophy hunter there. I think it was just a case of, it was my first deer, and Dan actually had like just so many skulls all around his house. It was pretty much an empty house, but there were skulls under the beds, in the cupboards, on the walls. But I don't think I'll get to that point, hopefully.
And being someone artsy, have you done something sort of special or different with the antlers, or like the rest of us, have you stuck them on the wall?
I haven't done anything with them. I've literally just got them like on my desk, a different desk. I think I will mount them at some point. I don't want to paint them. I thought about it. I was like, oh, I could, create something, but I don't know. I've not seen a lot of good artistic skull work. I just don't think it's appropriate, really. I think it is what it is, and it shouldn't be messed with too much.
There's definitely something to say for sort of the natural beauty of, because they are amazing things. I mean, you've got a lovely roebuck up there, and just seeing all of the it's just incredible.
Not very interesting.
It's a very nice one, actually.
The audio podcast listeners.
No. But I the buck I shot was quite a young buck. It's not a particularly impressive head, but it just has so much meaning. And
it's funny how first, everyone remembers the first stalk. It sounds like a sort of obvious thing, but when you sort of think about it, I don't remember my second deer at all.
No. But I remember
you guys
first.
Not too many, so many deer.
Let's not talk about that. I remember first of sort of specific things. Like I remember the first. This is going to sound really weird. I remember the first deer I shot when I had my puppy with me.
Yeah.
And I remember, because there was something memorable about that. I remember the first one I shot with a new rifle, or the first I've shot on a new piece of land, or something like that. But as you, I can't remember which one of you it was that said, but the ones in between just kind of blur into nothingness. Yeah.
A little bit. Yeah. And you got a better memory than I do.
Maybe.
So I literally just remember
it's all the beer.
That's true, actually.
Yeah.
Definitely doesn't help.
So you, after you'd shot that first one, was that you, the bug, well and truly bitten, and you thought, I've got to do this more, or did it take a bit of a while to come to terms with it, and you came back later, or?
I went back. It's quite a long time ago. I think I must have done quite a few stalks after that were not successful with an animal at the end. We went up to Scotland in Dumfries, Castle Douglas, Dumfriesshire, stalking roebucks, and basically saw nothing up there. He was a really good stalker, by the way. It's not like he wasn't good, but
Is this your final revenge to your ex? Just like absolutely slating his stalking ability? We went stalking loads and never saw anything.
No. Yeah, so I think we must have gone out stalking a few more times, and then I didn't stalk again until 2020, which was on my Chinese water deer for the Field Sports channel. So it wasn't a case of I didn't want to do it. It's just that I didn't feel a need to go out straight away and get it another one. I never feel that, and I don't think I will. But it is a very special thing to go out. And I mean, I don't have a firearm certificate, so I go out a lot just walking or with like binoculars or a camera, and sort of do my own half job of stalk, but it's not usually that early or that late, so it's never really very successful. But yeah, I love just being out there and being kind of part of their world and escaping from people, which I think a lot of deer stalkers have in common, is we don't really like people that much. What were you guys? You guys are nice.
Yeah, absolutely. So the deer that you've shot, I mean, spoken before about being a vegan and a hunter. You eat the venison that you've shot, but do you eat other game, venison, pheasant?
I mainly eat just what I've killed myself, but I have eaten venison from people that I know who shot it, and I know their ethics, and I know that they're a responsible person. It's sort of like, I wouldn't just eat any venison, definitely not from like a menu or something, because chances might not be wild. But I want to know, like, I always ask like annoying questions of like, why did you shoot it, and where did you shoot it, and how good a shot are you? No, I'm kidding. But yeah,
I see a copy of your target. Yeah.
People that I trust. But to be honest, I don't eat a lot of venison. I've eaten more this year probably than ever. But it's pretty much nothing. I eat 97% plants, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, a lot of people will think, veganism, hunting and deer stalking, that's a bit of a contradiction in terms. I mean, I think both of us sort of, are definitely of the viewpoint that it isn't. But can you sort of just explain a bit to our listeners about, your ethics about hunting and why you think it's, they sort of go together?
Sure, yeah. So it was when I went vegan, it was because I watched a 10-minute video about sort of behind the scenes of an abattoir, and I don't know why I clicked on the video, but I just suddenly felt the need to be responsible for like understanding a bit more of it just comes from an animal, and didn't want to think about it. So within 10 minutes, I was like, I can't do this again. And I was with Dan at the time, and he was like, okay, but you still support conservation, right? And I was like, well, what do you mean, like killing deer? And he's like, yeah. I was like, I don't think so. I'm a vegan now, but tell me about it. So I was at a really unique position to be in that sort of transition of ethics with someone that was a deer stalker, because I don't think many people know deer stalkers who go vegan, or maybe they do and they just don't listen to them. But I was really interested in staying open-minded about it, and learning from him like why it's really important, and why management of deer is like essential for them, as well as all of the wildlife that surrounds them and the different aspects of management. And so I kind of made my own ethical diet, I suppose. And I'm not technically a vegan, but I think I use that term because it's the quickest way for me to tell someone if they're cooking a meal from me, don't give me meat, don't give me eggs, don't give me fish, don't give me dairy. Because, majority of the time that is the case. It's just deer management, as we all know, is just so different from the meat industry as a concept. But to someone that doesn't understand that, obviously looks like you're killing an animal for food or for fun. And it's the same thing, but it's not, obviously. So yeah, I sort of forged my own ethics, and I'm very kind of confident in it. And because I was faced with all these sort of big questions, I really had to question everything that I was consuming in lots of ways. So I'm very bad at shopping for new clothes. I'm always like in charity shops, and I hate being unethical and as much as I can, I guess. But I also don't like preaching about it too much, because there's no point. It's never going to be a good way to educate someone. So I've had a lot of conversations with people in the field sports world who fully understand my sort of ethics, but I don't think I've had as many constructive conversations with vegans.
Yeah, that was going to be my second question. What's the reaction amongst the community, the vegan community? Because to me, I think I'm obviously biased, but I think you can make quite a good and persuasive ethical argument for deer stalking.
Yeah,
it's almost hard to refute. They need to be shot. If you didn't eat the meat, then it would be wasted. All of these sort of arguments, to me, make a lot of sense. I mean, obviously, I don't see the other side of it, but what is the reaction from other people when they sort of?
It's actually funny. I think I've had the most rebuttal from people that eat meat but just don't agree with like field sports, but they'll still eat like beef or something. It's really weird.
Oh, really?
Because they're just like, well, why do you do it for fun? And I sort of explain it's not really fun, but some people find it fun, and why shouldn't it be fun if it's like doing a job that, you know, fun is a byproduct. Anyway, I think generally people just kind of focus on the terminology, and then it's like, well, you're not vegan then, are you? It's not actually vegan because the vegan doesn't kill. So they sort of, I'm umbrellaing the vegan community in a bad sense in that way, but I've had really good conversations with them as well. I think I've probably had a lot more conversations with field sports people because it's a very unique position in that world. Yeah. And so I can't fairly say that one is better than the other to have a conversation with. But it seems that people are very sort of understanding when I explain it. And a lot of people are like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe I should do that.
I think that's great. I think that's really commendable. The fact that you've taken this position and you're not, like you say, you don't yell about it, you're not that outspoken about it, but I think it's a great thing to sort of shine a light on, because it starts a conversation and makes people really think about deer stalking in a different way, which is really nice.
I totally agree. And is that sort of slight controversy there part of the reason you got involved with the Field Sports channel, or was that purely sort of coincidental? Or
well, it was an interesting one. So I met Paul Childley back right at the start of my business days, and I sort of vaguely kept in touch with him, and it was 2020, and I was like, right, lockdown, I'm just gonna work on the art and make that a real business that pays for itself. So I was like, okay, who do I know that can help? And so I was thinking magazines, right? I was thinking I need to get adverts or published in articles and things. So I reached out to Paul at some point. I was like, I'm playing my Paul card. I was like, hi Paul, do you know any editors of magazines that are like shooting related? He sort of said, well, sort of, have you thought of coming on the Field Sports channel? And I was like, what on earth am I going to do on there? Like, I can't draw live. You don't really want to talk to me about my art. And he was like, well, just come stalking. I was like, okay. And then I was so nervous to tell him that I was a vegan, but I was like, I've got to do it just so that he's aware. Anyway, we went out stalking with David filming, and we spoke a bit at the end. So we went stalking, showed my art and everything, and then we spoke about the ethics. And then because of that conversation, like the whole episode was on the ethics and nothing to do with the art. And it's fine, because I actually realized then, because they both reacted in such a positive way. I was so worried that people wouldn't. I was almost like ashamed of even telling them. But then they reacted so like positively, and then I realized actually I have something to say to this small part of the world, maybe, that there are different people that can get involved. And after that, it sort of became a little bit of a, not a mission, but it's just quite a nice thing to talk about, because a lot of people have very strong opinions about vegans from this sphere. So I wanted to sort of challenge that a little bit.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think a lot of deer stalkers almost feel like demonized by, anyone who's a sort of keen deer stalker has had the conversation where you sit down at someone at a party and you start, what do you do in your spare time? Oh, I like deer stalking. And, the reaction that you get from a lot of people it can be quite extreme, which is understandable when you suppose you think about people who've grown up in the city and all the rest of it. So, I guess it's nice to hear from the sort of, from the other side, like bridging that gap between the two, because they are two kind of diametrically opposed sides for debate.
Very controversial, very opinionated groups of people that I'm like, I'm
right between us.
Yeah.
We'll yell at you.
You're a brave woman, Katie.
Very
brave.
I feel like I'm genuinely, I just know what I think is not to be right, but like my ethics are very strong and clear in what I deem as ethical, and so I have no problem in talking to anyone about it, sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where the problem sort of comes is when people ask me about game shooting, which is I'm still not 100% sure what my opinion is on. It very much varies on shoot to shoot and the individual ethics, but I guess deer stalking is a bit more easy to say it's necessary.
Yeah. Well, me and Tom aren't that keen on game shooting either, so you're sort of amongst.
You're safe. So, seeing as you are a very brave lady, you kindly agreed to answer some listener questions.
Oh, yes.
And some of them you've agreed to answer blind, as in we haven't sent them to you before.
Oh,
But I don't think there's anything that controversial in here. We'll start with some of the ones we have sent you, so they hopefully shouldn't catch you too off guard.
I've not practiced though, so it might be terrible answers, Tom.
Okay. So the first one, which is from Jason Doyle, which, massive plug, we'd love to have you on, Jason. So if you're listening, please get in touch. So that was me playing my Jason card. So Jason asked you a question. When are you finishing your Japanese seeker picture? So I don't know if are you doing one for him by any chance?
No, it's not for him. So this is a good plug for me as well. So thank you, Jason. So I am creating some people may have seen it and some people actually have it, but I've created a British 6 print, which is basically one of each deer on one thing. And it looks amazing, but the first show that I took it to, someone that I was talking to who was clearly a very knowledgeable deer stalker, maybe slightly too knowledgeable, was just like, oh, do you know that that's a Manchurian, not a Japanese seeker? And I was like, I did know that, but that's fine, right? And I was like, oh God, I know that Japanese are more common in the UK, but I'm sure Manchurian is like somewhere in the UK. Anyway, realized like I'm never going to be happy until it's the British Japanese. That doesn't sound right, but yeah. So I decided, okay, I have to redo the seeker, and that's when it's going to be done. That's why I haven't like pushed it too much on social media so far. But the Japanese is the last one. So I asked Jason, I was like, you must know someone in Ireland that has Japanese picture that I can use. And he does. It's his friend who's a gamekeeper. And yeah, I need to draw that. And I think it's going to be out in the new year, hopefully.
You know,
keep your eyes peeled.
That would make a great page inside your deer log or whatever.
Yeah,
like, what did you call it? The
Dear
Journal.
Deer
Journal. That's it. There you go.
Yeah.
Inside front cover.
I like the
I
idea.
think you're right.
With illustrations.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could be a big seller.
You taking orders?
Pre-order.
Or
I'll pre-order now.
what, the journal?
Yeah.
Both.
Yes, and yeah, well, not to the journal because I don't know how I'm going to make it yet. So, but yes, to the print definitely. I'll send you guys.
Speaking of species, you mentioned you shot 4 deer. Were they one row, or and then Chinese water deer?
Yeah.
What else? What have you got?
2 Chinese water deer. So one was the first one with the field sports. Then we did another stalk the next year. So that was last.
Okay.
And then recently I went up to Scotland to do a commission. Actually, it was like a working holiday. So I went up to stay with my friend who's the estate manager on a lovely estate called Ray Forest up in Sutherland, and he wanted me to draw a stag on a Highland pony, which was really, really nice and special. And I was surrounded by the ponies themselves, and I could see them, hear the stags roaring the hills, and it was just like very holistic. But anyway, at the end of my stay, I actually got very lucky and went up on the hill to shoot a red stag. So I was very, very, very privileged to do that. And it was like with the ponies and everything. And it was just like probably the most dreamy red stag stalk. And I sort of didn't really understand at the time how lucky I was. But yeah, no, it was awesome. And yeah, haven't got the antlers back yet, but I will soon.
That sounds amazing. Tom's just been up to Scotland for the first time on the hill.
Yeah.
And it is just a different story, isn't it, compared to lowland stalking? It's
addictive. There was a point where I was like, I'm not coming home. I was like, I now live here on the hill. If anyone wants to come and visit me, I'm here. It was amazing. There's just something about it, isn't there?
Yeah. Well, it is deer stalking
Yeah.
isn't it? Really?
I think I said to the stalker whilst we were up there that what we do down here is deer ambushing. So like you vaguely know where the deer are going to be, and you basically like charge into their territory for a brief moment, hope that one walks in front of you and you kill it. Whereas out there, you are okay. There are deer out there somewhere on that hill. We need to go and find them, find a way to get vaguely close to them, and then shoot them, and then somehow drag them off this massive mountain. In my mind, it's barely comparable to what we do down here. It's crazy.
And it's so like it's got all that pomp and tradition
Oh
attached
yeah.
to it, which is it's sort of like shooting. It's like a pheasant shoot. I felt like you know how it's got everyone's got their tweeds and their tassels in their socks. I don't even know what they are still. But I was up there in my camo and I was like, I feel very underdressed.
It's very ritualistic, isn't it? Which is
Yeah.
quite nice.
Yeah.
There's a ceremony around it.
Yeah.
Anyway, we should press on with listeners' questions. We've got one here from Ian Richardson, who is an avid listener to the podcast. So thank you, Ian, again for submitting one. Ian has asked, what kicked off your career as a wildlife artist?
Hi, Ian. Ian's lovely. I feel like I probably answered that now. Well, no, I haven't answered the stalking part. But yeah, so it was Dan's sort of, so it was Dan's birthday. I'm a bit of a cheapskate, so I was like, well, what can I give him that's I don't have to pay for? And because I had been...
You northern, Katie.
How rude. To northern people. I had done a bit of painting at school. I did portraiture. I was sort of okay by the end of school. And I was like, oh, I could just do a deer since he loves them so much. So I chose a fallow buck. I probably typed in deer on Google Images. But I chose a fallow buck and I did a painting and it was okay. But he really loved it. And he was like, you should try a roebuck. I've never seen a roebuck drawn accurately before. So then I tried a roebuck and that was really bad. And then he tried some stags clashing and that was quite good. But he just sort of encouraged me to just keep trying new things. And he was a bit of an international stalker. So he was like, try a mouflon and a macaw and all sorts of weird and wonderful African antelope as well. So I got a very strange knowledge very quickly about antelope of the world. But then he suggested I did a black and white one. He's like, oh, maybe a big black and white elephant or something. And I thought, well, that's not going to work. Okay, I'll show you that it's not going to work. And then it did. And that was in charcoal. So that was the only material that I had that was sort of appropriate. I'd actually stolen the charcoal from school. So like a few years later, I was like, oh, that'll do. I'll use that stick that I've had lying around. Sorry, Mrs. Hunt. And yeah, so I then, because he had friends at Beretta in London, I managed somehow to get myself invited to a rifle launch event where there was probably like 50 to 100 people, probably 50 people. And I had a little stand with like the 7 different wildlife art pieces that I'd ever done. I was like, yes, I'm a wildlife artist. Had no idea what I was doing there. But then I sold 3 of the charcoals that I'd just tried out on that night to Oscar Waktare, who's the GMK boss man. And I class that as like the first day of business. But I remember that feeling of like, I created something like pretty much for free and it's just sold for quite a lot of money. It wasn't very much now, but like I just couldn't believe that I could make money off it. And that's how it started. And then a few months later I was at the game fair, so it was very much being thrown in at the deep end, and I had no idea what I was doing, but sort of learned on the job, I guess.
Okay. And Ian also has asked, have you considered any other medium aside from charcoal? Except perhaps pencil or something else?
Pencil, probably not. I quite like charcoal because you can move it around more than pencil. It's similar but a bit more flexible. Painting, I started in painting at school, so I'm sort of keen to try out more colour stuff through paint. I love the sort of play that you can have. I think over the years of my business, I've become more and more detail orientated and like trying to make it very accurate, whereas I started very like big, more expression-y sort of strokes and things. So I sort of want to go back into that looser form somehow, without breaking the sort of thing that I've got going. I'd love to do more abstract painting for myself and probably not share it on Instagram as well, because I've never had the chance. Well, I've never tried it, but I love the idea of just, because my art is not really like, I'm not putting what's inside my soul onto a piece of paper. I'm just copying something, so I don't class it as art in the purest sense, which a lot of people would disagree with. But yeah, I want to find out what's in my head with some colour. Maybe.
So, penultimate listener question is:
Okay.
do you have a favourite deer species to draw?
Yes. Can you guess what it is?
Roe.
I was going to say Chinese water deer.
It's definitely roe.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Because that's your first, or
No,
is that-
it's sort of nothing to do with stalking. I just love seeing them. I have some roe not far from my house, and they have come into the garden at times, and I just think that they're just beautiful and clean, compared to some of the other deer. They seem very kind of, they've got their wits about them, and I quite like that they're quite independent. Yeah, so I
They're
love
my favourite as well. They're
Yeah.
very magical, I think, as a deer
Yeah.
species. They're like little sort of woodland pixies. They sort of like, you know, about almost compared to like some brownie goat fallow that's just rolling
That's
around.
thug.
And all.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are. They're thuggish, aren't
Yeah.
they?
Yeah. And so I think also just to look at, like, they're very pretty, and I think that helps when you're drawing something that it looks pretty. So yeah, roe are my favorite.
I favourite here as well, so I think we're all.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. There's just something. I think it's partly also the time of year that you generally stalk them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a happy time to be out and about and in the countryside as well, and so I just always have fond memory, even if you go out and you don't see anything.
Yeah.
For me, as opposed to like when you're stalking fallow in like November, December, January, it's raining, it's cold, you don't see anything, and you're like, this is ridiculous.
Why do I do this?
Yeah, this is a crap hobby. I give up. Whereas in the summer, you don't see anything, but it might be a beautiful blue sunny day, sky day, and you're like, yeah, this is the best time.
It's very romantic stalking, I think. It's
Yeah.
just like skies and the heat. Yeah, it's great.
Have you ever called one in, a roebuck?
Yeah. I do it all the time.
That's amazing. Yeah.
I do
I
it
do
with
it
my
as well.
mouth.
I've got one in the
I'm gonna do it
car.
now, I'm gonna fail, but I can do it just with my mouth. I've
Oh,
never
really?
used a caller. Yeah.
Wow. I didn't even know you could do it.
I was about to
with
say,
your
you need to do it now.
mouth. I can do a little whistle, but it's nothing.
Okay, so this is like if they're very close. God, here we go. But
That is really good.
That is really good.
Thanks. But it doesn't usually work because they can't hear me. So then if they can't hear me, I'm like, and that it works a lot. Like I speak roe, by the way.
That's great.
Well
I
done.
also speak seeker, but I'm not going to do it now.
Save that for episode 2.
Yeah.
Tune back in to listen to the seeker call.
I don't even know what seekers sound like.
Well, Katie's going to show us.
Terrifying. That's what they sound like.
Oh,
They sound like a screaming door that is creaking. Yeah.
oh, okay.
I can't
So-
read it, to be honest.
Our last listener question leads us quite neatly into the next sort of section of our podcast, where we normally sort of talk about favourite venison dish in terms of both species of deer, the cut of meat, but also how you'd cook it. And this question comes from Bet's Pets, Berkshire. And she asked, how do you feel about cooking venison?
Hi, Sam. I know all these people. I feel quite emotional, actually. I cook venison usually when it's a celebration meal. So for Christmas, birthday, because I don't eat a lot of venison. It's sort of it's a big thing when it happens. And it's usually me doing it because I sort of want to do that. Um, and I remember carving the venison leg that I had for Christmas dinner like a few years ago. And it was just after shooting it, like a few weeks, and I was crying whilst carving it, like trying not to, but just like I couldn't stop because I was just so connected to the moment of like watching it for a few minutes alive and taking its life and all of that, and I just felt so connected and so grateful. And yeah, maybe it's a bit sad really of me, but like I was fully involved in that animal, and that's really important to me. So I always try and be connected to it, and I get very annoyed if I see people eating venison without being like present. They're like sort of not really realizing that they're eating it, and I'm just like, do you know what that is? So quite emotional, but just very respectful, and I feel like I'm giving it a full sort of respect after taking its life to like not waste anything of it. So yeah, but I love it, and it's nice to feel connected, and I think that might seem weird to people that I would like want to remember taking an animal's life when I'm eating it, but to me that's like that makes a lot of sense. I don't know about you guys, like how do you feel? Do you ever think about that moment?
Sometimes is the answer. I mean, I suppose it's different because we don't necessarily like have a particular cut of meat and associate it with a particular stalk. Because it all gets kind of mixed in, with the mix of whatever you chuck in the freezer. And
how do you store your meat?
Bung it.
It all just goes in one big pile, and he just picks a bit off each time. That's it.
I think the honest answer is I'm probably a bit more numb to it because I feel like the volume, because the more you do it, I think it's the same with anything. The more you do something, the less sensitive you get towards it, and I definitely have felt that. The more I've done with it. The first year that I was stalking, I felt a lot more. I felt a lot more guilt towards it actually. I think that kind of has gone away as I've done more and more of it.
I've got a weird sort of psychological block in that with fallow, I feel no remorse or guilt at all, because in my mind they're just this sort of
fallow.
I know, I don't know what it is. In my mind, they're just this sort of thuggish pest that I don't really need to worry about. But when it comes to roe, and maybe it is because I've got that sort of attachment with roebuck, so it's that time of year and everything like that. Generally, once I shoot a roebuck, I think, oh, and there is that slight sort of pang of guilt. I think you've taken something out in its prime point of the year as well. There's for me, there's so much more emotion attached to it, and I probably only shoot 2, maybe 3 roebuck a year as well. So it's much more of a
special
occasion. Whereas fallow, I mean, we're going through hundreds of them. So yeah.
And you can't attach that sort of guilt to all of that, otherwise you just go insane. So
yeah,
you have to
cry an awful lot before you.
Yeah, we'd be wrecks.
But I think it's important. I think people are too disconnected from. I mean, people are too disconnected from the food that they eat. Definitely. And that people don't give any thought to where the food comes from these days. And
that's something I often, if ever I'm a sort of a dinner party or something like that, and someone says, "Well, how can you go out and shoot something for pleasure and then eat it?" And I say, "Well, how can you pick a pack of meat off the supermarket shelf and go home and eat it?" So for me, it's the same thing. At least, yes, I have killed that animal, but I've taken responsibility to make sure it's done ethically, cleanly, humanely, properly, I will make sure that every last scrap of that animal will end up in my freezer or on someone else's plate being eaten. And I know it's been handled in the best possible way it can be. And so that for me gives me pleasure.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And it's always it's at dinner conversations that you have these annoying ethical debates, because you're like, I always have the questions of like, so how can you be vegan and a deer stalker when I'm about to start eating? And it's like, and those other people are eating meat or something, and I'm like, I'm not going to tell you why I'm a vegan and what I think about what you're doing right now. It's like the worst possible time to have that.
Yeah. I think we need to normalize it. I think it needs to be. I think it needs to have like a name for the diet of eating game, or like venison, or whatever you're comfortable with.
you were saying this.
I've been plugging this for ages because my girlfriend is similar to you in the sense that she's vegetarian, but she will eat meat if it's been shot.
Yeah.
Under certain scenarios. I think it's catching on as a thing, and I try and do it. I'm actually pretty good. I think I very rarely buy any meat in. To be honest, between especially in the winter, I don't have any need for it. I think it needs a name though, so people can kind of.
So there you go, listeners. You'll have to write or email in to us and let us know what you think it should be called.
We needed something catchy.
Yeah.
That people can. Yeah.
So Katie, your one venison dish, if you could only have one venison dish for the rest of your life, what would it be?
You told me this question before, but you phrased it differently. You said, what's your favorite one to cook? And
you said what cut and how would you cook it?
Yeah.
Okay, well, anyway, my brain goes to venison stock soup. And that's probably a strange answer.
We've never had soup before.
Yeah.
I get behind soup. I love soup.
Really?
Yeah.
The reason I say that is because like I don't cook a lot of venison, but when I do, I will like not waste any like tiny fiber of meat. I will boil the bones afterwards. I'll make soup, and I love that, and it's like one of the best things for you. But I think it just, for me, that sort of sums up like the whole ethos of it, and like not wasting anything, and like really trying to take as much as I can just to like respect that animal fully. So yeah, I would say that, with bits of like venison floating in it. Just a bit of texture.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Now you've got me on board as well, yeah. When I thought it was just going to be a kind of stock, very thin soup, and I was about to end this episode right there. But now that you mentioned sort of chunks of meat in it, I'm on.
Yeah,
game on.
I've been eating recently, and it's actually like helped my skin a lot. So I think it's very good for you.
There you go. How do you make what's your recipe? Your venison stock recipe?
Oh, it's like super boring. It's literally just water, bones, boil a lot, and then drink all and that's it. It's just it sounds so boring.
It's simple
but the best.
Yeah.
And I think that is also like I when I cook venison, it's always much just the venison, because I want to like fully enjoy that taste. And probably because I don't eat a lot of it, I don't want it to like blend into any sort of stew or anything. I want to like really have it as that like pure taste, I think. So yeah, I'm a bit of a purist when it comes to that.
So Katie, we're going to move on to the final segment of our podcast, which we have warned you about. I don't know. Do we need to keep explaining to the listeners?
Explain it.
Okay, so we're going to move on to Bobby's Bits, which if as a listener you've no idea what that is, go back and listen to a previous episode where we explain all about it. If you've come this far, you know what it is already. So Katie, is there a piece of deer stalking kit or equipment that you're currently hankering after?
A good pair of trousers that are warm, because I've got quite a few, and it's not any specific brand. And to be honest, I'm hoping that I'm going to get it secondhand somewhere, because I don't like buying new things. Yeah, I want I want some like warm gear, basically. I've got all the like summer stuff, but I'm sort of a fair weather stalker because of my gear, I guess. Yeah, some trousers. I recently purchased a waterproof jacket, which is from a New Zealand brand that is 100% recycled water bottles.
Wow.
And
That's
because
impressive.
I was like, but it's from New Zealand and that sort of like damages the environment, I waited until my brother, who lives out there, came back home so he could bring them with him. So it's a very eco-friendly delivery as well. But yeah, it's actually really good and quite cool, I think.
What brand is it?
They're called Hunter's Element. And it's got a light blue zip, which is a kind of a weird feature, but I think it suits my sort of slightly unique style of being a bit different in this world.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. If any listeners know of any sustainably produced
Yes.
stalking trousers, warm ones, or where you can get some good second-hand ones.
Yeah,
I don't think you get them in a charity shop. I do a lot of charity shop digging, and I've never seen warm trousers. It's mainly like old suits and horrible pairs of shoes.
Probably eBay is like the place to go, but I haven't really looked.
That's true.
Or have you looked on the stalking directory?
That's true, actually. That's very good.
No.
Place.
What is that?
Oh my! You've not heard of the stalking directory?
No.
Oh my God, Katie, you're about to lose hours of your life.
I think, Tom, you're assuming that Katie's
Oh,
going
no.
to be interested.
Oh, no.
Interested in the stalking directory as well, which is definitely not the case.
I've just ruined the rest of your week, probably. It's an online forum dedicated to all things deer stalking. But
Is that where you can find a trip to go deer stalking and stuff like that?
Anything to do with deer stalking, there will be a thread on the forum for some. You've got to go and have a look at it.
It normally ends in an argument, though.
There's some very opinionated people on there, much like your Seeker Stag chap. There'll be a lot of people like that on there.
Oh yes.
So I guarantee if you put on there looking for a size whatever women's second-hand pair of stalking trousers, someone would respond and be like, "Got them."
Yeah, genuinely.
Okay, I'll try
People
it.
are very generous, aren't they? They send you.
Yeah.
Some people send you loads of free stuff from them.
Yeah.
Do you type in anyone got any free stuff?
I
probably would.
Yeah, you probably
would. To be honest.
You probably could get some. I've always been amazed on there at how much the stalking community will help each other. So I posted on there a while ago. I was looking for some very specific bullets, some 150 grain Fox bullets, and I put on there. I was like, I'm really desperate. Does anyone know where I can buy some? Some chap came back to me and was like, I don't know where you can, but I've got a box of 30 sat in my cupboard. I don't need the last 10. I'll post them to you for free if you can send me your address. And I was like, that. In what other hobby would you find someone? And true enough, I sent him my address thinking, he never will. And true enough, an envelope arrived the next day with these 10 little bullets to reload in, with a note saying "Happy hunting." And I was like, what an absolute hero.
Not many stalkers in the UK. We've got to stick together. It's great.
Yeah,
it's true.
There you go. You found the place where we all hide now, Casey. It's called the Stalking Forum.
I can't wait to go and explore.
Oh my God.
Good. Well, on that note, Casey, should we let you go and explore the deer stalking?
I'm already on it. No.
The stalking directory. But thank you very, very much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I can't believe where an hour has gone.
We always say this, don't we? It just does evaporate the time. People say, "Oh, why don't you do 20 minutes?" You just can't cover anything.
No.
In 20 minutes.
No, I like kind of going into depth a bit as well. It's nice to have the space to do so. So thank you for that.
That's all.
Thank
Been
you.
great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Katie.
Thanks.
Thanks everyone for listening, and tune in for the next one.